I lived by his rules. I had to keep to my end of the island, and I must never light fires. It was all quite clear. With any real hope of immediate rescue diminishing day by day, I became more and more resigned. I knew I had no choice but to accept his terms and go along with this regime, for the moment. He had now marked out a frontier, a boundary line in the sand from the forest down to the sea on both sides of the island, and he renewed it frequently, as often as it needed to be. Stella strayed over it, of course. I couldn't prevent her. I did not. It wasn't worth it. In spite of the animosity I had seen in his eyes and that huge knife in his belt, I didn't really think he could ever hurt me. But I was frightened by him, and because of that, and because I had too much to lose, I did not want to confront him. After all, he was providing us every day with the food and water we needed. I was beginning to find some edible fruit for myself, in particular a prickly shelled fruit, rambutan, I later discovered. It was delicious, but I could never find enough, and besides, Stella would not eat it. I found the occasional coconut still intact, but often both the milk and flesh were foul. Once or twice I even tried climbing for them, but they were always too high, and I very soon gave up. I tried fishing in the shallows, fashioning a crude spear, a long stick I had sharpened on a rock, but I was always too slow in my strike. There was often plenty of fish, but they were too small and too fast. So, like it or not, we were still very much in need of the daily ration of fish and fruit and water the old man was bringing us. I had searched my end of the island for fresh water, but I could find none. I thought often of trespassing into the old man's part of the forest to look for it, but I dared not. For the most part, I kept close to the forest tracks. It wasn't only the old man's laws nor the howling of the monkeys, which I came to understand as a warning, that prevented me from venturing into his side of the island. It was the orangutan too. He had seemed placid enough, but I had no idea how he or his friends might react if they found me in their territory. I kept wondering too what other creatures might lurk unseen, waiting to ambush me in the dark damp of the forest. If the constant jungle talk was anything to go by, the place was crawling with all sorts of dreadful creatures. Just the thought of the orangutan and the terrors of the unknown in the forest were quite enough to deter me, enough to stifle both my curiosity and my courage. So I kept largely to my beach, my cave, and the forest track up to my hilltop. From high on my hill, I did catch distant glimpses of the old man. Often in the mornings I would see him spearfishing in the shallows, sometimes alone, but often accompanied by a group of orangutans, who sat on the beach and watched him. 14 or 15 of them I counted once. Occasionally he would be carrying one of the young ones on his back. When he moved amongst them, it seemed almost as if he was one of them. Time and again I tried to stay awake until the old man came with the food at night, but I never managed it. I never even heard him, not once. But every morning the water would be there, the fish too. It often tasted smoky these days, which I liked better. The fruit would not always be the same. Much of it was strangely scented, and not all to my liking. I ate it anyway. Besides bananas and coconuts and berries, he would leave me breadfruit or jackfruit. At the time, of course, I had no idea what they were. I ate everything, but not so greedily now. I would try to save some of the fruit for an evening meal, but I could never bring myself to save the red bananas. They were just too delicious not to eat all at once. My recurring nightmare was the mosquitoes at night. From dusk onwards they searched me out, buzzed in on me and ate me alive. There was no hiding place. My nights were one long torture, and in the morning I would scratch myself raw in places. Some of the bites, particularly on my legs, had now swelled up and become suppurating red sores. Ow. I found relief from them only by dunking myself often in the cool of the sea. I tried sleeping in another cave, deeper and darker, but it smelled dreadful. Once I had discovered it was full of bats, I left at once. Wherever I slept, the mosquitoes found me out soon enough. It got so that I dreaded the coming of every night. I cried aloud in my misery as I swiped and flailed at them. I longed for the mornings, the cool of the sea and the cool of the wind on my hilltop. Here I would spend the greater part of my day, sitting on my very summit, looking out to sea and hoping, sometimes even praying too, for the sight of a ship. I would close my eyes tight shut and pray for as long as I could, and then open them again. Every time I did it, I really believed there was a chance my prayers would be answered. That this time I would open my eyes and see the Peggy Sue sailing back to rescue me. But always the great wide ocean was empty, the line of the horizon quite uninterrupted. I was always disappointed, of course, often dejected, but not yet completely despondent, not in those early weeks. I had severe problems too, with sunburn. I had learned rather late that I should keep all my clothes on all of the time, and I made myself a hat to keep the sun off my face and my neck. It was a very broad and Chinese looking, made of palm leaves, the edges folded into one to another. I was quite pleased with my handiwork. Sunburn, I discovered, was a discomfort I could help to prevent, and that seawater could soothe. At noon I would go down to the hill to shelter in my cave from the burning heat of the afternoon sun, and then afterwards I would go swimming. This was the moment Stella longed for each day. I spent long hours throwing a stick for her. She loved it, and to be truthful, so did I. It was the highlight of our day. We stopped only when the darkness came down. It always came down surprisingly quickly too, and drove us back once more to our cave, back to my nightly battle with my blood-sucking tormentors. One day, after yet another fruitless morning of watching on the hill, Stella and I were coming out of the forest when I spotted something lying on the sand just outside our cave. At a distance it looked like a piece of driftwood. Stella got there before me and was sniffing it over-excitedly. I could see it now for what it was. It was not driftwood at all, but a roll of rush matting. I unrolled it. Inside, and neatly folded, was a sheet. A white sheet. He knew! The old man knew my miseries, my discomforts, my every need. He had been watching me all the time, and closely too. He must have seen me scratching myself, seen the red wheals on my legs, on my arms, seen me sitting in the sea every morning to soothe away my sores. Surely this must mean that he had forgiven me now for lighting the fire. I carried the matting inside the cave, unrolled it, wound myself in the sheet, and just lay there giggling with joy. I could pull the sheet right up over my face. Tonight there would be no way in for those cursed mosquitoes. Tonight they would go hungry. I went racing along the beach to the boundary line, where I stopped, cupped my hands to my mouth and shouted, "Thank you for my bed! Thank you! I didn't really expect an answer, and none came. I hoped he might come himself, but he didn't. So I wrote my thanks in the sand right by the boundary line and signed it. I wanted so much to see him again, to talk to him, to hear a human voice. Stella Artois had been a wonderful companion to me, good for confiding in, good for a cuddle, good for a game. But I so missed human company. My mother, my father, lost to me now, perhaps forever. I longed to see the old man, to speak to him, even if he was a bit mad, even if I couldn't understand much of what he was saying. That night I was determined to stay awake for him, but comfortable on my new matting bed, protected and swaddled in my sheet. I went to sleep quickly and never woke once. The next morning, after a breakfast of fish and jackfruit and coconut, Stella and I made our way back to the top of my hill, or Watch Hill as it was now called. The other one I had named His Hill. I was repairing my Chinese hat, just replacing some of the palm leaves. It never seemed to hold together for very long, when I looked up and I saw a ship on the horizon. There was no mistake. It was the long, bulky profile of a supertanker. What's going to happen next, I wonder? Well, wait for next week to find out. Right, say goodbye everyone. See you later, and hopefully we'll see you soon.